you know, what are your opinions kind of on the findings of the manuscript? And what would you really like to see next?
That was quite a bit, so let me try to comb through it.
Yeah.
Let me start with one personal observation is drugs are kind of used for two or three reasons. Uh, uh, One to escape reality. Um, Another is to uh, um, find a way to cope with reality, not really escape it, just deal with it for what it is. The
Mhm.
other one is just to have fun. It's a party. Uh, and the other was just, seen as a way to have fun. But over time, we've seen artists kind of infuse it as this enhancement to become a super artist. Not only in music, but even as an author. I hear other authors talk about how they've used drugs to see the world differently. Um, and it doesn't take cocaine to do that. If you think about Tylenol, it allows you to uh, um,
For sure.
change your interpretation of the pain you're feeling in reality. But in terms of music and its effect on society, I mean, it's absolutely correct. Even based off the earlier points we were making in terms of you have these, I mean, you have some artists that can pack a football stadium, over 90,000 people in one location off of their isolated talent.
Mhm.
And that's only in one spot. And they're all there to listen to what you have to say. That's an enormous amount of influence. So if you say Black Lives Matter, well, even if I disagree with that statement walking into the arena, I'm going to reconsider it because you said it.
Mhm.
If you say, um, I smoke weed and it helps me see the world differently, which allows me to create more enlightened material, well, I would imagine the people that are there to listen to you will uh, consider that a possibility for themselves. And the same with this study on cocaine. I mean, the more it's said, the more it's praised, the more comfortable people get with the idea, which increases their likelihood of giving it a try. Um, I think the unfortunate part, which J. Cole is changing that perception, is uh, everyone talks about the wonders and not the consequences.
Mhm.
So we as listeners aren't getting the full scope of what it is that's being communicated. Um, and that's why I appreciate that J. Cole says, listen, if you want to do drugs, do them, but understand here are the consequences. And I think artists over time are beginning to realize that their message really impacts the way the world is moving. Uh, I remember, is it the 70s or 60s and 70s? I think that's what we're seeing today in different forms. I think today drugs are seen as this opportunity to and heighten your perspective, and I think that's unfortunate because I think it does more damage if you continue to do it versus more good.
Mhm.
Um, in my community, I know you did your study on cocaine, but in my community, promethazine has become the most popular uh, talked about drug in music. That's, I mean, think about the effect on that. They had to start asking for IDs to get Robitussin from the local
Right.
CVS because artists like Lil Wayne popularized the ideal of mixing cough syrup into Sprite, and then you have now a liquid drug you can drink that gives you the same effect if you decided to smoke. So kids said, "Well, I can't really get a hold of that prescription, but I idolize this artist and want to give what they're talking about a try. So closest thing I can get to it is Robitussin. So I'll just try that." and then you saw an effect on that. We've had artists in the last year, maybe 3 or 4, die for drug overdose.
Hmm.
Some have been reported having seizures because of drug overdose. So they themselves are starting to see the consequences of their actions. But their reality is so much different than their listeners that they may have the resources to combat the problem.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, but sometimes financial disparities limits options, and you're just stuck with whatever the consequences are. Uh, there's another thought that I had. Uh, Artists are inspired by artists.
Hmm.
So if an artist, like, I'm a fan of Stephen King, so I read Stephen King's book on writing. Well, in his book, he confesses to using cocaine, um, tobacco. He was an alcoholic, and
Hmm.
while he was doing all these things, he was turning out the best books of his life.
Yeah.
As an inspiring writer, how should I take that information? He said it's bad,
Hmm.
but he also created some of the greatest literature in our country.
Hmm.
So if I listen to Jimi Hendrix and he has a song titled Purple Haze,
Hmm.
Purple Haze is a strain of marijuana, and he talks about how it allowed him to kiss the sky and have this very beautiful relationship with the world. Well, how do I interpret that?
Hmm.
And do I use it? Artists are inspired by artists. So if an artist is talking about cocaine, it's likely that the next artist is going to talk about the same thing. And then you start a trend until another artist comes along and says, hey, maybe you should reevaluate the way you're thinking about that. And I think that's what we see in J. Cole, Jay-Z, and there are other artists in other genres that are doing the same thing that extend beyond drugs, you know, just there are some women or female artists that are communicating equality for women, and that's had a huge impact.